Yes. Okay. Just about time, I think. I believe we're being recorded. So, welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do we have apologies for absence?
Yes, we have one apology from Josh Potts.
Okay, I've seen another one from
Ian Stannard.
Ian Stannard and another one from Francis Haig. Right.
Chairman? Sorry, Chairman, if I may, is it appropriate here? I've just heard, and I'm actually shocked, that we lost Chris O'Leary.
Good afternoon.
And
Sorry to be late.
We lost Chris O'Leary. So I just mentioned it for those who haven't yet read the email, but I just, I'm sure we all want to send our condolences to the family. And he was a fabulous guy, and he was a great officer. He used to help all of us enormously.
Yeah.
So I just make that statement, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we've all benefited in different ways from Chris's help as members of the council, and I know probably everyone on the council and all the council officers at different times have benefited from his knowledge. So yes, it is a very sad loss at a relatively early age. So a bit of a shock. Right. You've had the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections, comments on that, or can I sign that as a true record of our last meeting? Thank you. Right. Declarations of members' interest. Do you have any declarations? On the agenda, we have the Cabinet Forward Plan, and on the Cabinet Forward Plan is the Community Advice Partnership Agreement, which is a re-provision proposal. As I'm a volunteer at the Horsham CAB, I have a non-pecuniary interest in that if it comes to be discussed. Okay, announcements. There's no announcements from the Chief Executive. I've got a couple. We were due to have a presentation on the Council Zero Carbon Plan, but Councillor Circus contacted me last week and said that because of the situation with the Conservative group and the fact that there will be a new leader at some point, presumably at the next council meeting, he felt it inappropriate to have that presentation made at this time, as it possibly could change under a new leadership. I thought that was acceptable. So hopefully at the next meeting, under a new regime, we will have a presentation on the Council's Zero Carbon Plan. We were also due to have Councillor Vanderklew here to talk about the South Downs National Park, as she's our representative on that committee, body. Unfortunately, today's meeting clashed with a meeting she has with the South Downs National Park, which is a task and finish group they have looking at the future of the old Beeding Cement Works. And as that is of interest to this council, I felt that's where her priority should lie. So again, apologies for that. And she has assured me that she will come to a future meeting to talk about the national park and answer any questions we have about her involvement there. And finally, I had suggested that we try and talk to Southern Water in view of the zero water mandate situation that Natural England have imposed on us. But I gather from Paul Clark that a number of meetings are taking place with the councils involved and the national park and Southern Water, and it seemed inappropriate to try and confuse that situation at this time. But should anything come out of that, or should nothing come out of that, and we want to visit that situation, then I think that might well be something for a future meeting of this committee. So that's my announcements. So moving to item 5.
Chair, sorry, can we? Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I don't really think it's for the leader of the council to tell overview and scrutiny areas that it should and shouldn't be looking into. So really, I think it's for this group to decide whether or not they want to talk to Southern Water. And if this group decides yes, then that should happen.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this was a proposal that I was making or trying to feed into the agenda, and at the time it seemed that there were some sensitivities around bringing that to this meeting. But if you want to make a proposal that we invite Southern Water to a future meeting, then
Well, I think it's twofold. I think you're right. We probably do need to give them a little bit of time just to work out what's going on. But once the dust has settled and a proposal or an agreement has been struck or is on the table, I then think it's appropriate to talk to Southern Water and also Natural England. So I wonder if that could be arranged. I appreciate the fact that there might need to be a little bit of timing around that, because we don't want to get involved in negotiations right now, but maybe we do in a month or two, or 2 months.
thank you, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I'm very happy to support Councillor Wright in that, and also in the absence of, or the current void in the leadership of the council, it would be appropriate for overview and scrutiny to discuss this with Natural England, and it is known our water neutrality issue, so it might be for the betterment of our residents if there was someone from Southern Water or Natural England who could come in a public forum and explain where appropriate what is actually happening from their side of things and explain their point of view.
So, sorry, do you want to set a date for that now, or do you want to wait and see what transpires in the next month or so, and then?
I think what we're saying is that, Tony, we'd like to give you the full support of the committee to, once the dust is sort of settled, to bring them here to have a chat. So I think we'll probably ask again at the next meeting about how that's getting on. So that sounds good, all right?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wright. Fine. Okay. Council's Finance and Performance 21-22. Director of Corporate Resources.
Thank you, Chairman. This is your usual finance and performance report, and some of it seems oddly familiar. The financial performance actually for the year is looking extremely good, as we are forecasting a large operational surplus. This is a much larger operational surplus than the one we are usually forecasting at this time of year. And this is really because of the return of Places Ledger's business much faster than they suggested to us they thought it would when we were setting the budget at this time last year. Debt over 30 days, over 90 days is a problem. We know it's a problem, and we know the businesses that are problematic. We talked about them in the closed part of the agenda at the last meeting. I have sought more information as your Section 151 officer on some of these matters, because I am not comfortable with perhaps some of the behaviours of some of the companies concerned. Capital expenditure, as ever, is not as high as we would like to see it. Projects seem to be moving slowly. My suspicion is some of my colleagues, again, may be being over optimistic. I keep pushing them. I keep trying to get to a situation where forecast and where we actually get to is better. And one thing I will say, in that we think, sometimes do you think colleagues never listen to you at all, is that in setting the capital programme for next year, the bids are coming in spread over 2 and 3 years. So instead of whacking a bid in that is all in 1 year, or we're going to spend it in 1 year and then they miss it, they are beginning to think more strategically and spread it over a longer time. So your comments and mine are not completely falling on deaf ears. With regards to the performance indicators, 23 are on or above target and 5 just outside, with only 2 below. Of those, one of them is the attendance figures at the museum, which of course has only recently reopened. The corporate plan continues to progress surprisingly well, given the amount of COVID distraction there has been over a period. I'm happy to try and answer any questions. I didn't get any questions in advance, so if they are in too many obscure parts of Barbara and Adam's directorates, I may not be able to give you an answer tonight, but happy to try. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thank you. I should have written to you in advance. Apologies. It's about the second one that is flagged as red, RMB recompense 03. Could you explain that, please, for the layperson who may find it difficult to understand some of the language for other councillors' benefit? Perhaps.
Yes. Local authority error is basically just that. It's the number of mistakes that we make on this very substantial caseload. The government sets a limit of 0.4%. Now, 0.4%, when you think about it, is actually not that high. And what happens is up to 0.4%, the government will just take away from you the money of the mistake. Above that, we get into the dreaded realms of extrapolation. And those of you who were councillors here in 2014, 15, 16, 17 will have seen what that extrapolation did, in that the council lost considerable sums of money. Ever since our service has been with the Northamptonshire-based partnership LGSS, now Milton Keynes, we haven't had these sort of problems. But in the current year, in 21-22, very early in the year, colleagues found an old error relating right back to the census days that's still sitting in the database. And this has brought us very close to that 0.4%. So what that means is, as time goes on in the year and we find no more big errors, then we'll drop below the 0.4%. But if we find another big one, or indeed if the auditor finds one when they're auditing in November 2022, then we are carrying a higher risk, I would say, of an extrapolation and a significant, more significant loss of subsidy than in previous times. However, those who remember back a long time, and I know Councillor Donnelly will on this one, when we did lose a lot of money on this, we were above the upper threshold. At the moment, we're teetering close to the lower threshold. I think we're at risk of losing money for this year. That will become clear in November 2022.
That was very helpful to other councillors, I'm sure. My follow-up's more about the system. So it seems that we have found these errors internally. Is that correct?
Yes. So we do a 10% check of cases. So we don't check every case because obviously that would be too much workload. So managers and supervisors in the service check 10% of cases. And sometimes they'll find a mistake, or indeed an officer themselves in going into a case to do an update. So somebody sends you a change of circumstances, you go back into the folder, you open the folder, well, it's not a physical folder these days, is it? But you open the case and then you think, hang on, that's not right.
Is there a disincentive if someone finds an error in self-reporting it, because we know that the council will be punished financially? So if someone was to
No, that they would report it. In fact, if you're an officer and you find a mistake that somebody else has made, you're better off reporting it than having your name on that case as the last person who looked at it.
Councillor Wright.
Jane, thanks for this. Just similar to what Billy's saying, I know that there's a transition, isn't there, going on between Nottingham and Milton Keynes at the moment with some servers. That's not related to this, is it?
Not at all.
Fine, that's it.
So the report that's going to Cabinet that suggests we enter into a partnership with Milton Keynes. So you may have heard in the press about the breakup of Northamptonshire County Council into the two unitaries. So it broke into two unitaries. So our original agreement when we transferred to what we called LGSS, no longer exists, was with Northamptonshire, Northampton Borough, Milton Keynes, Cambridgeshire. That broke up, as did Northamptonshire County. So now Northamptonshire County, ever since April of this year, has been North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire. The Revenues and Benefits Service, which was Northampton Borough and Milton Keynes principally, went into West Northamptonshire. West Northamptonshire's equivalent of me has said, I don't want to deal with any partnerships. I'm not interested. I'm taking everything back in-house. They issued notice on Milton Keynes and said, we're getting out and we're going on the 5th of November. They didn't even do their 18 months. They just went. That left Milton Keynes in the situation. What are we going to do with Horsham? Actually, we like working with Horsham. It works well for us. It shares some of the costs of our heavy end specialists. So Milton Keynes have made us the offer to renegotiate and carry on with them. I'm very happy with that offer. I think it's a good one. They want a slightly changed arrangement because they want it to be more of a partnership and less of a bought service because they haven't got a partnership because the old LGSS has gone. Alongside that, they have to get the servers out of the Northamptonshire County Council server room. We have a project to do that. Milton Keynes have entered into a contract with Capita, who are the supplier of our system, to move it into the Capita cloud. So it's their system in the Capita cloud. It shouldn't go wrong. It's getting, as ever with IT projects, slightly delayed. So we were hoping for April. It now looks more likely to be August. Once the servers are in the Capita cloud, I think that actually puts Horsham in a better position because should anything ever happen with our partnership with Milton Keynes, the servers will be sitting in the Capita cloud and we wouldn't then be left in the position of having to physically move them about. So when we left Census, we had to physically move them up there and all sorts of complications ensued. The contract is written that it could be novated to us and our lawyers have looked at it. So it is relatively safe.
Councillor Green.
Apologies, Jane. Make sure your time here is worthwhile by asking you some further questions, if that's okay. Appendix A to begin with, one question which I think you'll be able to answer is this, this is on the yellow notices. This is FS07, the percentage of invoices paid on time, which is 10% below target. It mentions in the report about a combination of a handful of specific invoices and holiday impacting on general efficiency of the process. Is there enough capacity of staffing in the department for paying invoices on time at the moment, or could you just extrapolate on that on the notes there, please?
Yeah, I think it's not really the finance department. We have two part-time colleagues who do the payments, and they're pretty efficient. They do a payment run every week, so it's there to be done. The problem is that the invoices have to go back to the manager responsible for the service. So if they are on holiday and forget, as many do, or don't know how, they should to because it's easy, transfer their payments to somebody else. So when I go on holiday, I transfer all my payments straight across to Dominic Bradley and he will pay anything that comes up in my absence. We're not totally sure that all our colleagues remember that little trick, because you put your out of office on, you should transfer your payments. If somebody goes off for a couple of weeks and it's not been set up and we don't realise, that can build a delay in. So yes, it is a bit careless, but it's a bit hard to control. We can keep reminding them, and if you only do it every, couple of months or so, you forget probably.
So it comes down to humans more than anything. It's a
Oh
human.
yeah, it's human. It's humans, not process.
I understand it from my own paying invoices at work myself, which get reminded about by our finance team. So I understand that. I have some further questions. If that's okay, Chair. Jane, I don't know if this is one you get a better answer, so it might be one for noting. It's household in temporary accommodation. Please could you expand on the private sector leasing, which is being considered alongside a potential capital bid to acquire more? I presume that would mean housing stock. So it's HS18. It's on the front. It's just two below where we were.
Yeah, my understanding of the private sector leasing is we try to get private landlords to lease properties to us in larger numbers. We were quite successful last year. I remember one coming on with 5 flats, which is really helpful. Buying accommodation is difficult because it's so expensive. Colleagues haven't spoken to me about buying, except with the exception of whether we will need to do it in order to do the green measures that we'll need to do going forward. We might need to have a bit of a decant area in order to bring these houses, the houses we do own, there's only about 9 of them, I think, up to standard. The more people we can get into accommodation, clearly the better. We recently had to house quite a large family, and fortunately we did have a vacancy in one of our own properties at that point, and were able to move them in. When a family has a large number of children, it's very difficult. But obviously when it's small households as well, we need smaller accommodation. We seem to have available to us more 3-bedroom accommodation, whereas what we need is 1 and 2, and occasionally a 4 or 5.
Mr. Donnelly.
I'll come in on that one. The council have been congratulated in the past, was it 3-4 years, where we actually did go out of our way to build and or buy accommodation under our own control, because as the director was saying or suggesting, B&B is very expensive, and therefore by being able to put people into our own facilities certainly saved us a lot of money, as well as gave them a lot more stability. It had been under our control, control of our offices. So that's been a very good project. I guess the problem was is you can never predict how much you're going to need in the future, and that's where the difficulties do come in. But I think it has been a very good initiative, and it certainly has saved money. Thank you, Chairman.
We exhausted on that? Finance and performance?
I do have more.
Oh, okay.
Seem to. Jane, Appendix C, Oakhurst Business Park. I'll take an answer in writing if that's okay. Could you just explain to me, perhaps, later on or in writing, the Oakhurst Business Park £679,697?
I believe that is Oakhurst Phase 4.
Okay.
Which was the extension of some units because the tenant in those units was expanding. There are some issues around that now, which I'm happy to explain to you, exempt, but not in the open part of the agenda.
That's fine.
For a change, we have Councillor Wright.
Yes, sorry, it's the young ones. debtors, is that commercial rent write-off? Is that a monthly figure or is that rolling cumulative? So as in September, we wrote off £44,000 worth of rent. No? Debtors, it's budget monitoring, forecast outrun. Bottom figure of the table on the right-hand side. We there? So is that the figure? So did we write off 44,000 in September and 30,000 in October, or you wrote off part in each month?
I think these actually are some notes about things that may be written off rather than have been written off, because I've no recollection of writing off those sums.
Well, because above that, the reason why I asked is because I thought the same, but it says commercial rent and current possible part write-off further up. So
some of these are within my write-off limit, which is up to 100,000. Some of them are the cabinet lead. Councillor Landereau is strongly disinclined to write off these sums, as you probably know his commercial background, as indeed am I. So we will be doing some more work on these before we concede they have to be written off. I will write off clearly if a company is bankrupt and no longer exists. If a company is still around and still trading, I'm very loath to do so.
Are you able to keep us informed and just clarify what that figure is at the bottom of that table?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly.
I had the privilege when I was cabinet member for finance to be writing these figures off as well. And due respect to the lay peoples, they do look like big figures, but in reality they're not that big. But the biggest problem, of course, is that the officers and also the cabinet member who does the write-offs is faced with totally impossible situations and being involved in bad debts in giant international banks. A lot of experience in it. But we had the ability to be patient and sit it out for a couple of years. But where people have gone insolvent or have disappeared over the horizon, never to be seen again, a lot of the debts that the council is writing off will not be recovered, end of story. But it is carefully monitored and watched, but and it's very annoying, but I'm afraid that's just part of the business life of the council.
Councillor Boffey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up question. Unfortunately, when it comes to accounting, I tend to know enough to be dangerous, but not necessarily always enough to be right. But when it comes to debtors such as this, I mean, I don't really do local authority accounting, but would you have the option essentially of providing against these bad debts such that you expense them to pay the P&L, so we've taken that hit, but you don't necessarily actually give up on, and if you do actually manage to recover some of it in the future, you can bring it back in? There
are provisions made. So when we close the accounts on 1 year, Dominic Bradley sets a new provision for the next, usually in consultation with Brian Elliott, the head of property, based on what he thinks. So of course, some of these come from the COVID period, from the lockdowns. So yes, there is a provision. So we wouldn't be taking a hit into this year's accounts on this. This will be against the provision. And just because they're written off, if we can still get it out of them afterwards, that doesn't mean it's gone. We will carry on. And that is exactly the same in revenues and benefits, in revenues where we obviously carry much, much higher levels of debt.
Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thank you. Can I bring you to Appendix E, please, Jane? The top line. The progress update is the delay in the local plan over water neutrality, and the statement received from Natural England. When was the council or you, as director, first made aware that this would be an issue on water neutrality?
Personally, when the letter came in, which I couldn't tell you the exact date because I'm not in planning. I'd not heard of it before. I believe may have heard something, but it was, yeah, it's around, but don't worry about it. Sort of something, not we're going to do anything. There was no indication. I know the director of place was as shocked as I was when that letter came in. She'd received nothing to tell her to expect that.
Okay. If I can just further down, I might come back to that. That's okay. There's a report under a thriving economy that says it's on railway stations. This goes back to the North Horsham development, which obviously is now, like everything, affected by the water neutrality issue. It says there's been a report received on the short to medium term about a new station on the line is not feasible. Could that report be shared with Overview and Scrutiny, please?
I'd have to check with my legal colleagues on that.
That's fine. It's just because my mind is cast back to when we passed a motion supporting a new railway station as part of the North Horsham development. So
Yes,
just be
and
interesting.
I think we were all incredibly disappointed when we heard that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. So just that's would just be interesting to expand our knowledge on that, and to, if that report has been received, if it could be shared with members of this committee.
But Chairman says it's not feasible in the short to medium term, so it's dead.
Yeah. Short to medium in railway terms is
50
a
years.
very long time.
50 years, yeah.
Yes. Yes, so if there is a report, we could see that, I think would be useful, but it's clearly saying that there's no capacity on that line for any more stations, I think. Okay, so we're done with that agenda item. So the next agenda item is the cabinet forward plan. There are 4 items for cabinet on the forward plan for this coming week's cabinet. Does anyone wish to raise anything on any of those? No. Can I just make a comment on the having declared my interest in it, the Community Advice Partnership Agreement? It just seems strange to me that this is going to cabinet this week when the agreement is due for renewal next April or next financial year. I just do not see any way that that is going to be anything other than rolling over the existing scheme, because there's absolutely no way in God's earth that a new provision is going to be drawn up in that short time. But that's just, yes, absolutely right.
I had the privilege of being the deputy cabinet member for that portfolio, and if you attend cabinet, there will be an update from Rob on exactly that subject.
Right.
But the work of that community advice partnership is across 7 different local authorities, and it's one bid put together by 7 different local authorities, which is why it's been brought now. And I think it does, as you know, as a volunteer yourself, and all the great work it does. So it's great for all should be able to be part of that and support that.
Yeah, Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, this has actually been quite a successful agreement. I think we pay about 90,000 into it, as do the other councils, as James has just said. And they are experts. I mean, not everybody who's on is an expert. Oh, sorry. And
Of course.
they have vast experience on it. Of course, we have a lot of experience amongst our officers, but the nub of the matter is that if we didn't give them the ability to increase their staffing levels to provide advice to the community, we would have to do it. I think it would be about 90,000, be at least 3 officers, say about 3 officers. We'd have to do the officers, but would they have the same expertise? So it is reviewed every year. I do remember a Scrutiny working party many, many years ago, because I sat in it, inter-council one, as James was saying, several councils were involved, all councils in fact locally involved. And certainly at that time, as I think now as well, everybody thought it was working well. It was a good idea, but it is reviewed regularly. Normally, I think it was set for 4 or 5 years with a possible couple of years extension. And then is it possibly now back for full renewal? I don't know, but it's worked well in the past. and I presume it still is doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Yeah. So did anyone want to make any comments on, well, we've talked about in some aspects of the budget and financial strategy already. The other ones there are the community advice partnership, service provision for revenue and benefits, which the director's already talked about, and the arboricultural contract, which is partly exempt anyhow. But just okay. Sorry. So the next item on the agenda is the work programme. I haven't seen any new work programme suggestions coming through. I've just got a message from Councillor Croker, which I will endeavour to get to, see if it's important. Or maybe not.
I'm sure it's.
I'm a really big fan of Apple.
Maybe he's finished his task and finish work.
Oh, come on. Okay, so I've got an update from Councillor Croker on the his task and finish group, which briefly is saying that on 21st of July, terms of reference were agreed. 11th of August, a discussion and work plan was agreed, and it was agreed to invite relevant HDC officers to respond. 25th of August, 2 HDC officers, including the head of strategic planning, gave oral answers to questions submitted in advance. Written answers are still awaited on summary of member involvement going forward with the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. How are sustainable travel infrastructure proposals evaluated within HDC? And in the officer's view, what internal changes, if any, would help HDC meet its ambitions to gear change? And then on the 15th of September, West Sussex County Council's head of transport network management agreed to answer questions relating to terms of reference. I'll circulate this to members after the meeting, but pleased that we have some sort of update there. So do I take it that there are no items for consideration for the work plan at this meeting? Okay. We have the other task and finish group now has a set of terms of reference, and we will be endeavouring to meet shortly. And unless there's anything else, sorry, Councillor Donnelly.
At the last meeting, you recollect members expressed concern that the recommendation that was approved by council vis-a-vis the off-road parking task and finish group appeared to have disappeared into the long grass. I thank you for writing to the director about this matter and noted the reply we received. But I find it absolutely amazing that, yes, okay, we all know that strategic planning is under the cosh, it's got a lot of work to do, et cetera, but specifically when this motion that Scrutiny put forward to council and was approved unanimously by council was in February this year, 9 months ago, we were more than aware of the hardships that strategic planning were under. And that being the case, we said, well, they can delay embarking on this project for 4 months, 3 or 4 months. However, we also said because of the pressures on them anyway, that as normal, they could employ a consultant and if necessary, 1 or 2 extra staff to get the matter going. So there would be no labour weight on strategic planning. Strategic planning, for those who don't follow it, or the financial side, Jane may correct me if I'm wrong, are probably the biggest users of consultants in the council, probably for good reasons, because they have lots of things, new things. I mean, look at this water neutral thingy-jiggy that's come up to put a spanner in the works. This is a horrific one. And that does impact on their workload quite a lot. But by providing a consultant and, if necessary, a few staff, a straightforward project like the off-road parking could be put in place. It's a project which the citizens of Horsham have been after for decades, and it impacts every single ward. I had the privilege of being on planning north as well as south, and I was quite amazed that I hadn't quite comprehended when I sat in those meetings in north, the huge amount of difficulties the North Committee has in having to support planning applications where there's clearly inadequate off-road parking. One of the best examples I always use is the area around the capital. Now, that's a lovely area with old Victorian houses, but they're teeny-weeny streets with no off-road parking anyway. And it almost seemed like meeting after meeting, there'd be applications to put blocks of flats or extend blocks of flats or blah, blah, blah into there. It's 50 flats and 10 parking spaces. And it just common sense that, this was wrong, but we didn't have any ability to control it. And that was one of the many reasons, of course, why the Scrutiny Committee formed, almost 2 years ago, Tim? Mm-hmm. The off-road parking task and finish group. We had some fantastic support from the Democratic Service officers. A lot of work was done. Highways also attended several meetings, which was fantastic. And the report went to council, was it first in December 20? Council asked us to tweak it or something. Yeah. So it went back in, it was about December 20. I think the final report was approved February 21. So it's 9 months ago. And as I said, due cognizance was taken of the workload that strategic planning was under. But the recommendation particularly did say that they must keep in touch with the task and finish group to advise them of what's happening progress-wise. Stupid me, in a Planning North, did hear the former cabinet member for planning when off-road parking came up in North, as always did, saying that, I may have been wrong, but I'm sure said, Billy might remember, that a consultant was being recruited. And silly me, instead of following that up, I thought, oh, that's great. They're under the flag. Now they're doing something. So that's good. But nothing's happened. And I just find it difficult to believe as well that they have chosen to, or have unfortunately forgot about this project because they've not kept Scrutiny or the task and finish work group in the loop, which they have been instructed to do so by the council approved recommendations. So it does give cause for concern that it seems to be disappearing. I hope it's not. In fact, it is astonishing that we're even talking about it like this, because a recommendation of council is a decision made by the members, which must be put into place. And it's not as though this project was a surprise to anybody. We've been talking about it for years, but certainly the last 2 or 3 years, it was well known to strategic planning and everybody in the council that it was being investigated. Perhaps one of the unfortunate or disappointing factors was that strategic planning never ever discussed it with task and finish or even with Scrutiny, which is a wee bit of a shame. So it does give me cause for concern that the latest email from strategic planning sort of talks of it, going further into the long grass. I suspect there's something wrong here, and I believe it should be brought to the attention of the executive.
I suppose the quickest route would be, there's a cabinet meeting on Thursday. I get invited to that as chair of ONS, and there is a slot on the agenda. So the quickest route seems to me for me to bring that up on Thursday with the cabinet and ask them when they're going to agree a budget for a consultant to start doing this work.
Well, thank you, Jim. I think it's a very generous offer, and I certainly would support that. But I think you must make it clear, and I think the minutes here tonight should make it clear as well, that the committee is not at all happy with the state of affairs.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a very important initiative, which it's non-political. It's got every single citizen in Horsham district have been welcoming this. It's a blight on every single ward. And even when we all go electric shortly, it's going to make no difference whether you have a petrol car, a diesel car, or an electric car. You can have a car. Certainly in the next 20 years, I don't think any of us can see the disappearance of motor cars whatsoever, whether they're right or wrong. The reality is it is a problem. And some really lovely areas are being just turned into mass car parks. As I say, if you park over there, which we used to do in the station, what's it called, the BT car park, used to walk it. And I mean, lovely part of Old Horsham, Victorian, lovely streets and building, absolutely swamped with cars, So I think that's a great suggestion by you, and I'm sure others would agree with it, but I think it has to be made clear that really something should be done. I mean, I don't see how it can impact on strategic planning's current heavy workload, which we all acknowledge, whereby a consultant will be employed probably 3-4 months, if necessary, with a couple of extra temporary staff, because this is a council recommendation, which has not been implemented, which suggests there's a failing of the system somewhere and needs to be looked into. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that slightly, I mean, we had recently an additional budget approved for consultants to look at the impact of the second runway at Gatwick. So, it's not unheard of, and clearly that was considered to be somewhat more pressing than something coming out of scrutiny. So,
well, Chairman, if I may interrupt, with due respect, I don't think so. And why is that? Because we have zero impact on Gatwick. And as I've been saying for years, Gatwick 2 is going to happen, and Gatwick 3 probably in about 25 years is going to happen. The money's around, it's going to happen. But the reality is we can huff and puff as much as we like, and many of us have a lot of concerns about another runway. It's going to happen. And in fact, if we're going to be global Britain, by the way, we've got to extend our runway capacity. I mean, I'm sorry, it's very much anti the COP 29 or 57. But the reality is that it's going to happen. And but we have no influence. We have no vote. We don't sit at the table. We can make a lot of noise. Whereas with off-street parking, we're going to have a rapidly improved quality of life for our citizens by controlling all this swamping of our lovely wards with cars unnecessarily. It's something real and simple, and a lot of other councils are doing as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Right, seems to be no other business on the agenda. I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance, and
Yeah.
see you soon.